The wind howled across the frozen plains of Viera, cutting through the thick layers of ice that covered the planet like a white, jagged blanket. Snow whipped across the horizon in violent sheets, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. The cold was so sharp it burned the skin it touched. In this harsh, frozen world, survival was not just difficult, it was nearly impossible. Yet, life clung stubbornly to the icy land, struggling in pockets of fragile warmth. Lyra stumbled through the snow, her tiny feet sinking with every step. She was small, even for her species, and her body was delicate, not meant for such harsh cold. Her breaths came in short, ragged gasps as the icy wind stole the warmth from her lungs. Her skin had already started to turn blue, and she shivered uncontrollably, wrapping her thin arms around herself in a futile attempt to keep warm. Every step was a battle. The snow beneath her feet threatened to pull her down, and the sound of distant predators, low growls carried by the wind, made her heart pound faster. She had lost her family hours ago when the blizzard struck without warning. One moment they had been moving together, and the next a wall of snow had engulfed them. She had fought to hold on to them, but in the chaos she had been swept away. Carried by the wind and disoriented by the endless white, now she was alone, cold, and terrified, with nothing to hold on to but the hope that someone or something might find her before the cold took her life. In the distance, moving steadily across the ice, was a figure unlike anything Lyra had ever seen, clad in a protective suit that glinted faintly in the storm. The human moved with determination, his steps steady despite the snow swirling around him. Ethan had been sent by the research team to explore the frozen planet, mapping its dangerous terrain and cataloging alien life forms. The planet had a reputation for being deadly, and many missions had ended in failure. But Ethan was experienced, resourceful, and unafraid of the risks. As he trudged through the snow, Ethan noticed movement ahead, a tiny figure struggling against the blizzard. He squinted through the storm, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. His instincts kicked in immediately. Humans had always been driven by a strange combination of curiosity and compassion. And something about this small, fragile creature triggered both. He adjusted the thermal setting on his suit to keep himself warm but alert, and carefully approached. Mindful of the slippery ice beneath his feet, Lyra had noticed the figure too. But in her exhaustion and confusion, she could not tell what it was. She froze, too weak to run, too terrified to move. Her small body trembled violently, and her teeth chattered against the icy wind. She tried to speak, calling out in her alien tongue, but the sound barely carried in the storm. The human stopped a few feet away, raising his hand slowly in a gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice calm but strong. He knelt carefully, taking care not to slip, and reached into his pack for a thermal blanket. "Here, take this." Lyra hesitated. She had never seen a human before. She had heard stories of humans, of course, but in her world, they were strangers, mysterious, and unpredictable. Her instincts screamed to run, but her body betrayed her. She was too cold, too weak, too small. Slowly, cautiously, she allowed the human to wrap the blanket around her shivering shoulders. The warmth seeped into her frozen skin, and for the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of relief. Ethan lifted her gently into his arms, mindful of her fragile body. Every movement had to be careful. One wrong step could injure her, or send them both sliding across the ice. The storm showed no mercy, but the human's strength and determination seemed almost unnatural in this alien environment. He shielded her with his own body as they moved toward a temporary shelter he had set up for himself. Inside the shelter, the fire burned weakly, but it was enough to drive away the worst of the cold. Ethan placed Lyra near it, wrapping her tightly in additional layers to preserve warmth. He knelt beside her, checking her condition. Her skin was still tinged with blue, and her breathing was shallow. He pressed a small device against her chest, a simple alien translator and health monitor, hoping it would help him understand her physiology better. Lyra blinked up at him, confusion and fear in her wide eyes. She wanted to speak, but her teeth chattered too violently to form words. Ethan smiled gently, understanding the fear in her gaze. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The wind howled outside, rattling the thin walls of the shelter. Ethan worked quickly, reinforcing the structure with ice blocks and spare panels from his equipment. He melted snow for water, prepared a warm nutrient paste that was safe for alien biology, and monitored her vitals closely. Each small sign of improvement gave him hope that she might survive this storm. Lyra began to relax, bit by bit. She had never experienced warmth like this. Not just the fire or the blankets, but the calm, steady presence of someone who cared. Ethan's voice, gentle but confident, became a tether for her mind, pulling her back from the brink of panic. She wanted to ask questions, to understand, but the translator device was slow, and her thoughts were muddled from the cold. Still, she tried, making small gestures, pointing at her limbs, the blanket, the fire, and finally, at him. Ethan interpreted each carefully, smiling at her attempts to communicate. Hours passed, and the storm outside raged on. Inside, Lyra's color slowly returned to normal. Her shivering lessened, and she began to regain strength. She observed Ethan silently, noting the way he moved, the careful way he handled objects, and the unwavering focus in his eyes. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen, strong, kind, and fearless in the face of danger. Something inside her stirred, a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan, in turn, watched her with a mixture of awe and concern. Humans were curious creatures, and the alien before him was fragile but intelligent. He marveled at how her species had survived in such a hostile environment. He made a mental note to study her physiology, her resilience, and her instincts. But for now, his priority was simple: keep her alive. As the night deepened, the storm showed no sign of letting up. Outside, the ice groaned and cracked under the weight of the wind, and distant predators roamed, searching for prey. Inside the shelter, Ethan and Lyra remained close to the fire. He shared small stories of his homeworld, of humans and their strange customs, hoping to provide some comfort. Lyra listened, her large eyes reflecting the flickering flames. She could not fully understand, but she felt the intention behind his words, the warmth of someone who cared. Eventually, Lyra fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. Her small body curled tightly against the fire. Ethan stayed awake, keeping watch, making sure the fire remained strong and the shelter intact. He knew the storm could endanger them at any moment, but he also knew that hope was alive now, kindled by the small bond they had begun to form. The night passed slowly. Snow drifted against the shelter, the wind shrieking like a chorus of ghosts. Ethan remained vigilant, checking Lyra's breathing, adjusting the blankets, and whispering reassurances. Her tiny body, once on the verge of freezing completely, was now recovering. He marveled at her resilience, at the spark of life that refused to die, even in the harshest conditions. When dawn finally broke, pale light filtered through the icy clouds, illuminating the frozen landscape. Ethan stepped outside to survey the surroundings, the wind still fierce but less relentless. He returned to Lyra, who had begun to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition. She looked at him, then at the fire, then at the vast frozen world outside. She did not speak, but her small hands reached out toward him. A silent gesture of trust. Ethan smiled and gently took her hands in his. "We'll get through this," he said. "Together." Lyra felt a warmth that went beyond the fire, a hope that had been missing since the blizzard took her family. For the first time, she believed she could survive. As they prepared to leave the shelter, the bond between them was clear. Ethan, the human, had not only saved her life, but had given her something far more precious: hope. The frozen world was still dangerous, still unforgiving, but now Lyra was no longer alone. She had someone who would guide her, protect her, and help her find a way through the ice and snow together. They stepped into the harsh light of the frozen planet. One small alien and one human bound by trust, courage, and the promise of warmth in a world that had known only cold. The storm had not defeated them. The ice had not claimed her. And as they moved forward, side by side, Lyra felt something she had never known before, sensed that, perhaps, even in the harshest world, life could survive, hope could endure, and warmth could be found in the most unexpected places. The morning sun broke through the lingering clouds, casting a pale light over the frozen plains of Viera. The storm had passed, but the cold remained, sharp and unrelenting. Snow glittered like scattered diamonds across the ice, and jagged mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks lost in the pale sky. Lyra stepped carefully out of the shelter, still small and fragile, but stronger than the day before. She glanced at Ethan, who moved with quiet purpose, checking the equipment and preparing for the journey ahead. "You're awake," Ethan said gently, smiling. "Good. We have a long way to go if we want to reach the research base before the next storm hits." Lyra nodded slowly, her blue-tinted skin returning to a normal, healthy hue. She had slept deeply, and the warmth of the fire and Ethan's careful protection had revived her. She still shivered slightly, but her confidence was growing. She wanted to understand this human who had saved her, whose calm voice and careful hands had given her hope. Ethan handed her a small insulated suit to protect her from the cold. It was designed for a human adult, but with careful adjustments, it fit her tiny body snugly. She wiggled into it, awkward but grateful, and felt a strange sense of safety. Ethan noticed her hesitation and offered his hand. "Come on," he said. "Step carefully." Together, they left the shelter. The landscape was unforgiving. Ice stretched in every direction, cracked and uneven, with sudden crevices hidden beneath thin layers of snow. Predators were still out there, shadows moving in the distance, drawn by the scent of life. Ethan led the way, carefully marking their path and scanning for danger. His movements were precise, showing experience and ingenuity. Humans had a way of adapting, thinking, and surviving that Lyra had never seen before in her own kind. As they moved, Lyra began to learn. Ethan showed her how to test the snow for weak spots, how to use ice crystals to catch water, and how to read subtle changes in the wind that could signal danger. She was amazed at his knowledge, his calm in a world that seemed impossible to survive. For the first time, she felt that survival was not just luck, it was skill, courage, and determination. Hours passed, and fatigue began to weigh on Lyra. Her small legs ached, and the cold still threatened to seep into her bones. She stumbled, slipping on ice, and for a moment, fear gripped her. But Ethan was there instantly, steadying her with a strong hand. "You can do this," he said. "Take it slow, step by step." Lyra looked up at him, feeling a warmth beyond the protective suit and fire. His words, his presence, gave her strength. She nodded and followed his instructions, learning to move with care and confidence. Slowly, step by step, she regained her balance and began to keep pace. By midday, they reached the edge of a frozen canyon. The ice below was thin in places, cracked and treacherous. Lyra hesitated, fear evident in her large eyes. Ethan assessed the path, then looked at her. "We have to cross carefully," he said. "I'll go first, then guide you." He moved like a shadow over the ice, testing every step, using his equipment to anchor himself. Lyra watched closely, studying his technique. She realized that humans had a way of thinking ahead, predicting dangers, and finding solutions where none seemed possible. With Ethan as her guide, she took a deep breath and began to follow, mimicking his movements. Her confidence grew with every successful step. Halfway across, a sudden crack split the ice, and a small sheet began to tilt dangerously. Lyra froze, terror in her eyes. Ethan acted instantly, reaching for her hand and pulling her to safety. They both fell onto the solid ice beside a safe ledge, hearts pounding. Lyra's small body trembled, but she looked at Ethan with gratitude and awe. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan smiled gently. "And I will again if I have to. That's what humans do, we protect. We fight. We don't give up." The words resonated deeply with Lyra. She realized that survival was not just about enduring the cold or avoiding predators. It was about courage, compassion, and the determination to help one another. Humans carried a light that could survive even the darkest storm. She felt hope blooming in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with fire or blankets. As they continued, Ethan noticed her curiosity about the environment. He encouraged her to ask questions, pointing out the strange crystalline structures in the ice, the way the wind shifted the snow, and the subtle signs of life hidden beneath the frozen surface. Lyra's mind raced with wonder, and she began to see the world differently. The cold was still harsh, but it no longer seemed completely hostile. There was beauty, there was life, there was hope, especially with Ethan by her side. Late in the afternoon, they reached a plateau overlooking a frozen lake. The ice was thick, smooth, and eerily still. Lyra paused, staring at her reflection in the pale surface. She saw herself, small but alive, and felt a surge of pride. She turned to Ethan, wanting to express the gratitude she felt, but unsure how. He noticed her hesitation and nodded encouragingly. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "Humans can survive a lot, but you're learning fast. You've already come so far." Lyra felt her chest swell with determination. She had faced almost certain death, yet here she was, alive, learning, and discovering courage she didn't know she had. The human had not just saved her life. He had shown her a way to survive, to grow, and to hope. Night fell again, bringing darkness and sharper cold. Ethan set up a small camp near the lake, using a combination of ice blocks and his equipment to create a windbreak. He built a fire, its flames flickering against the icy landscape. Lyra huddled close, feeling the warmth spread through her body. She watched Ethan work, fascinated by his ability to create comfort and safety in the most hostile environment. Humans had a way of shaping the world, bending it to their will, while respecting its dangers. As they ate a small shared meal of nutrient paste and thawed water, Lyra began to speak in her alien tongue. Ethan listened carefully, using the translator to understand her. She asked questions about him, about humans, about the world beyond Viera. He answered patiently, sharing stories of courage, exploration, and the simple acts of kindness that humans valued. Lyra listened intently, absorbing every word, her trust in him growing. Over the following days, their journey continued. They faced more challenges. Snowquakes that rattled the ground, predators lurking in the shadows, and treacherous crevices hidden beneath deceptively smooth snow. Each time, Ethan led with skill and bravery, teaching Lyra how to assess dangers, how to react, and how to stay calm in the face of fear. She began to anticipate his movements, to understand his methods, and to act alongside him. Their teamwork became seamless, a dance of survival that drew on both human ingenuity and alien instinct. Through it all, Lyra grew stronger, not just in body but in spirit. The small girl who had once been blue from cold and fear was now alert, resourceful, and courageous. She discovered her own abilities, keen senses, quick reflexes, and an instinct for detecting danger that complemented Ethan's skills. Together, they were more than just a human and an alien. They were a team bound by trust, courage, and the desire to survive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ice, Lyra paused to look at the frozen world around them. She saw the harshness of the landscape, but she also saw beauty, the sparkling crystals of snow, the way the wind shaped the ice into delicate patterns, and the soft glow of the distant aurora painting the sky in faint colors. She turned to Ethan, her eyes shining with gratitude and newfound hope. "You've shown me something I never knew," she said softly, her words trembling but clear, "that even here, even in the cold, life can survive, that hope can exist." Ethan smiled, placing a gentle hand on her small shoulder. "That's what humans do," he said. "We find ways to survive. We protect. We fight. And we give hope to those who need it most." Lyra felt a warmth unlike anything she had ever known. It was not just the fire or the thermal suits, or the shelter they had kept her body alive, but the human's courage, kindness, and unwavering care. She understood now that hope was a gift, and Ethan had given it to her freely. The night passed peacefully, and when morning came, they resumed their journey. The path was still difficult, the cold still biting, but Lyra walked with a new confidence. She had learned to trust herself, to trust Ethan, and to believe that survival was possible even in the harshest world. She had been small, fragile, and lost, but she was no longer alone. By the time they reached the edge of the frozen expanse, where the terrain began to rise toward the distant research base, Lyra felt a sense of triumph. She had survived the blizzard, the cold, and the dangers of Viera. She had discovered courage, resilience, and the power of hope. And she had learned that human Zethon in particular could be a source of warmth, strength, and guidance in the most hostile conditions. Standing at the edge of the ice, Lyra looked back at the path they had traveled. The snow stretched endlessly, harsh and unforgiving, yet they had conquered it together. She glanced at Ethan, who offered a reassuring smile, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with strength, hope, and courage. The tiny alien who had once turned blue from cold now stood tall, her spirit warmed by the presence of a human who had shown her that survival was possible, and that hope could exist even in the coldest, most desolate worlds. Together, they stepped forward,